Salutations from 1980's EPCOT. The Lookback Machine is here exploring Cranium Command, part of EPCOT's Wonders of Life Pavilion, which opened in 1989. The attraction combined animatronics, live-action footage, and animation to deposit park-goers inside the mind of a young boy trying to make his way through the day. The attraction closed its lengthy run on the first day of 2007, but the story lives on. And to get that story, you need to get to know Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise, two Disney story men who rose up the ranks together to eventually direct 3 Disney features. But the attraction, Cranium Command, would be their launching point. It's probably best for them to just introduce each other. Director Kirk Wise.
Even back at CalArts, Gary was very distinct. You know, he would wear his camouflage pants and his long red hair and big red beard and his visor. That was kind of Gary's uniform at CalArts and through a number of years when I worked with him at Disney.
Director Gary Trousdale.
Yeah, long hair, giant beard, and the visor. And the visor, I don't even know why that started. I just started wearing it, and it just became a habit to the point where, you know, I was uncomfortable without it. Here's the thing. I was picky about my visors. I didn't want logos on them. You know, I didn't want, like, you know, sports teams or, you know, designs. I just wanted a plain white visor. Fortunately, a local golf shop that sold them. That's the only place I could find them. I don't remember where I got the first one, but after that, it was like, crap, where am I going to get one? Because, you know, they would wear out or they would get, like, irreparably stained or something like that. And so I went through a number of them, but this long gone golf shop was where I would pick them up.
So yeah, he was very distinct, but cartoonists as a breed can be a little eccentric and are definitely, have very strong individual personalities. But I liked Gary right away at CalArts because he was funny and he was very friendly and gregarious. And, his storyboard drawings, I remember seeing them on the wall at CalArts, were hilarious. I remember seeing like animation of his student film. We all shared this video downshooting camera where we could shoot our pencil tests at CalArts. So not only could you look at your own pencil tests, but if you rewound, you could see like all the pencil tests from all the different students that had been shot that day. And I remember Gary's animation, even though it didn't look like quote unquote Disney style animation, it was really funny and his timing was just spot on. His timing of his slapstick gags. So it was just so fun to look at. So yeah, I was an admirer of Gary's work very early on.
I remember him at CalArts. I don't remember like, oh, that's the first time I met Kirk. I always said Kirk was smarter. He's one of the funniest people I know. He's really smart, but he's really funny. He will make you laugh. And he was a lot more traditional looking. I mean, I don't want to say conservatively, but, you know, basically he looked like a regular guy. He didn't, you know, there wasn't like a big standout thing with Kirk. Although he could do this thing with his eyebrows that was really envious. He could make his eyebrows work independently. I swear to God, he practiced in the mirror, but when he wanted to, he could make his eyebrows do really fun things. Okay, I do have a Kirk story. And he's probably not going to appreciate this. I mean, everybody's heard this. When we were on Hunchback, one of these times we needed to pick up Demi Moore for Esmeralda. And she was in Fort Lauderdale at the time, and she was shooting striptease. So Don and Kirk went to Fort Lauderdale. But at the end of the session, she said, "So you guys are staying in town, right?" "Yeah." "Well, I'm going into town to a strip club to research this role some more. Do you want to come with me?" And Don said, "Well, you know, I'm a married man, and you know, that's probably not great with me." Kirk, who did not have a girlfriend, did not have any excuse, like totally dropped the ball. Said, "No, I can't." And his excuse at the time was, "What if somebody finds out, you know, and it looks bad for the company?" And everybody I know, like male, female, whoever, who heard that story went, "What the hell were you thinking?" You said no to going to a strip club with Demi Moore? You know, that's basically the story. Oh, he like totally flustered him. You know, that Demi Moore asked him to a strip club. I mean, it would have flustered me too, let's be fair, but goddamn, I would have gone.
When we finally got to work together at Disney, it just felt like a comfortable pair of shoes because we found so much of the same stuff funny. We were both huge fans of Monty Python and the Marx Brothers and MASH, as well as old, you know, the old Jay Ward cartoons and Warner Brothers cartoons. So we just had a lot to talk about. We connected on a lot of different levels.
After working on a couple of features in storyboard, I got put into the development department under Charlie Fink. Development was a lot different then than it is now. Now it's like people reading scripts and poring over books and looking at, you know, properties that they can turn into a movie or TV show. Back then it was a bunch of artists. We called it daycare because it was a bunch of artists that Disney didn't want to fire, but, you know, no assignment for them. It was like me and Kirk Wise and Brenda Chapman and Chris Sanders and Kevin Lima. And, you know, we were all like kind of without assignment, but they thought, well, you know, maybe we can put them to good use. It was me and Kelly Asbury and Chris Sanders and Kevin Lima in one room. And that was a crazy room because we did more screwing off than we did work. Well, okay, Kelly was a big Kennedy assassination conspiracy fan. So for his birthday, we made him a Kennedy assassination cake. There's a line of toys called Playmobil, and we made a little cardboard building and called it the school book depository. We made a little fence. We had a guy with an umbrella. We had cameramen on a grassy knoll, and then there's a little limo, and we had, you know, we filled it with people, and we altered one of the characters to be JFK, and it was like in terrible taste, but Kelly loved it. We were in that room. You know, just all these different people were around in this development area. And the way it would work was our boss, Charlie, would like run in one day and he would say, okay, everybody drop everything. We're going to do Mickey Mouse Halloween. And then he'd leave. And that's all the direction we'd get. You know, there's no script, no outline, no nothing, just Mickey Mouse Halloween.
I remember it similar to Gary. It always seemed a little bit unstructured and a little bit chaotic. What we were working on in development seemed to be steered by, you know, whatever the whim of the week was of some of the top executives at Disney. That could, you know, could be Jeffrey Katzenberg, it could be Michael Eisner.
So we just start drawing Mickey Mouse, you know, in a ghost sheet and Donald Duck carving a pumpkin and stuff like that. And then a couple days later, he'd run in and go, okay, drop everything. We're doing army ants.
Army ants. I remember that being a big idea that got tossed around. And Charlie Fink running into the room and telling everybody to drop everything, and we were all supposed to start developing ideas for army ants. And
one of these days, he ran in and said, well, come out here and see this. And he had like an audio video cart with a video setup on it, and they were playing a video of what was going to be the pre-show for this EPCOT Cranium Command attraction. It was being produced by a studio up north in the Bay Area, and it was just in pencil test, but it was really clear that it was really awful. I mean, to be fair, it was being kind of shepherded at that time by Metropolitan Life. They were the sponsor of the attraction at EPCOT, and Metropolitan Life is not really known for its comedy or entertainment value. So it was like really dry and dull, and the attempts at humor were not great. The top brass had seen it. Michael and Frank and Jeffrey had seen it. They said, hold it, stop. How much have we spent on this? Stop. Why are we farming this out to, you know, some studio that's doing a crap job when we have our own people here? And so they dropped it into our laps.
One of those additional laps was Imagineer and animator Jerry Reese, who would become the go-to guy for wayward park attractions. Jerry had just finished Back to Neverland, the animation tour video with Robin Williams and Walter Cronkite, and a power of editing video with George Lucas, and now was working on the Indiana Jones Stunt Show Spectacular. So what was one more job on top of all of that? Imagineer Jerry Reese.
Peter Schneider caught up with me and goes, I know you're going to be really busy, but there's something else that we want you to take a look at. There's this show. It's called Cranium Command. You don't even know anything about it. It was Colossal Pictures was doing it. I knew the Colossal Pictures people. They were highly respected people up in the California, the Bay Area. They'd done a whole bunch of MTV like ID things that were great. Henry Selick had worked with them and done some kick-ass like stop motion IDs for MTV back in the day. So Colossal Pictures was it's a big name group. And he said, we just fired all of them. It's like, we effing hate it, except he didn't use effing. But we can't quite put our finger on it. We don't quite know what's wrong with it. So I'm going to screen it for you just to see the work in progress. And we need you to tell us what's wrong with it and what you would do instead. So they had a panic screening. And so that night I took a look at it. And the conceit is you're writing in a theater that is styled to look like a sort of stylized version of being inside of someone's head. You're looking out through the two eye-shaped screens to see the world outside. And then there's other screens above and below those that show you the right and left brain and show you appetite and the heart and adrenal glands and stuff like that. And it's supposed to be a message about how you deal with going through your day and manage stress. MetLife Company is sponsoring it. And so we've built this elaborate theater, and it has two audio animatronic figures that can participate in it, and it has all these screens, and pretty immersive, big thing. And it had 10 discrete sound sources. That was cut first at the time, was to have 10 discrete tracks you could mix anywhere you wanted. So it looked like a pretty amazing canvas to work on. So I look at it, and it was just, the script was so patronizing and embarrassing. I just went, even a child would be embarrassed to be looking at something that patronizingly written and performed. And, the ice screens where you look out into the world, they were off most of the time in their plans. And they would only turn them on when a character would say, let's see what happened when Billy faced his, classmate in the hallway. Let's take a look. And then the eyes would turn on and it would do something that was, really, again, very patronizingly done. And then they would turn off and see, did you learn your lesson? And they said, okay, you had a chance to look at it. Let's talk about it. So they put me on a conference call with, I don't think I've ever had quite this group of people, level of people on a call. It was, as I recall, Eisner, Katzenberg, Marty Sklar, who was wonderful guy at Imagineering that linked right back to the Walt Disney days, and just on and on with the high-powered people. They said, okay, what's your verdict? And so I let them know, well, there's several things. One is totally needs to be rewritten so that you get rid of the patronizing thing and you hide the lessons you're trying to teach in storytelling and character and things that you would care about. So it's just hide the lessons in entertainment and emotional connection. They're like, okay, got it. And then said, okay, the second thing is part of the message you're giving people is that they encounter these things during their day and they're stressed, and you have to figure out how to manage stress in the moment on the fly before you walk away from that situation or deal with it. It's in front of you. So stop turning the eyes off. You got to leave them on all the time. That's what we deal with in the day. And by the way, if you do that, it'll feel like you're on a ride instead of sitting in a theater. And we can do things like take the audio animatronic figure. They happen to have a pilot figure, essentially their consciousness, right? And it's hearing arguments from all the different sort of emotions and parts of the body and making the ultimate decision about where to pilot this person. You're riding inside of a 12-year-old boy's head. And when he makes the decision, then they take action and you see through the eyes, okay, now what happened since he's decided X, Y, or Z? And I said, look, if you keep the eyes open, when the character point of view pushes to the right and he takes a step to the right, I can swing that audio animatronic figure to the left and feel like there was centrifugal force and feel like you are moving through the day with this kid. So take away that whole theater feel and replace it with a being on an attraction feel. And they're like, okay, cool. That sounds great. It's a lot more work though, because you have the eyes open all the time. It's like, yep, but it's going to be an important change. So cool. Third thing is I would take all the other characters, like right brain, left brain. They were saying, well, it's someone, you would get someone to sound rather like Charles Grodin, and you would animate a character that is a caricature or whatever. And I said, I'd like to go kind of Terry Gilliam and just build a live action stylized interior of a body. I mean, that's what your theater space is. It's a real physical, architecturally built stylization of being inside of a head. So let's continue that motif and have a live action right and left brain and figure out what those spaces would look like physically and cast the real people. Don't get somebody like Charles Grodin, get Charles Grodin, get John Lovitz himself, get all these people in there. You know, Bobcat Goldthwait would be the perfect adrenal glands with his scream back then. It was what the trademark. So anyway, with all those three things in mind, they're like, great, go do it. Because like half the schedule was gone, part of the resources were gone. Same opening day that was glowing on the calendar. So it's like, okay, all approved, hit the ground running. Now we sat there and just went through a reinvention of the story and even what the characters would do.
Meanwhile, Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise would start on fixing the animated pre-show.
And it got assigned to me and Gary to basically completely rewrite and redesign and retool this pre-show for this attraction. You know, the main attraction was also going to be overhauled, but we were in charge of reworking this pre-show. That's how Gary and I sort of got teamed up on the project.
This is the pre-show. It's a 4 to 4.5 minute pre-show that's going to keep people in line, entertained and informed as to what is going to go on in the 12-minute main show, you know, when the doors open up. We went, okay. Basically, we boarded it out in like a day or two. You know, we went home and we watched like movies with drill sergeants in them. I think we watched Officer and a Gentleman and Full Metal Jacket and came back in and storyboarded this thing in just a few days. I mean, less than a week.
Trousdale, can you walk and chew gum at the same time?
Never tried, sir!
I'd like to know how HQ picked you for this job, Trousdale, with a dartboard.
Part of it was also like looking at, you know, some of the other ride pre-show videos that they had, and they're simple, you know, it's like direct and to the point. Don't overcomplicate it because you're telling a simple story. We pitched it and they said, yeah, go with it. So Rob Minkoff was put in charge of directing this. Kirk Wise and myself were sent to Florida basically for the summer because the main show also had problems. The pre-show was like, yeah, it was a mess, but the main show was also a mess and it was a bigger problem. So we were rewriting and redesigning the main show, and Rob was directing the pre-show. A situation occurred where another director on another project had to be let go, and Rob kind of liked that project better. So he abandoned ship with full blessing of the studio. They said, yeah, you'd be better for this anyway. But that left the pre-show, which he'd only had a few weeks of his direction on it. Designs had been approved and voices had been recorded. You know, we had done the storyboard, and that was about it. So basically all the production still had to be done. And Kirk and I, because we were the closest to it, you know, having done the boards, they said, all right, you guys, you're going to direct it. That's how we fell into directing Cranium Command. It was an emergency production. We had 90 days to finish it, and we were there. We were available.
I'd made, you know, my student films at CalArts. You know, at CalArts, you were your own animator, your own director, your own story artist, your own editor. So I was certainly had experience in putting short films together. The biggest challenge for both me and Gary was just working with a large crew. I mean, having to kind of corral a lot of different personalities with a lot of different points of view and kind of herd them in one direction. Learning how to deploy artists in a way that would take advantage of their biggest strengths. And also the other challenge was learning how to verbalize direction in a way that was encouraging and supportive, yet also conveyed what we wanted, you know, the individual artist to do. That was, you know, new territory for me. You know, because artists have egos and artists have strong points of view. How do you get them to essentially do what you want them to do, yet leave room, you know, for them to interpret and create? Just finding that balance between the two, that was the biggest challenge in Cranium Command. And I basically learned how to do it by doing it. The fact that I was an animator and, you know, certainly conversant in the techniques and principles of animation, and certainly could work with animators on when talking about performance. The way Gary and I divided the labor, I would work primarily with the animators and the cleanup artists, and Gary would work with the effects animators and the layout department. And then the two of us would collaborate on story and editorial and the recording sessions. So yeah, I actually did direct the animators. even though I kind of lost out as an animator myself, I was armed with enough knowledge to be able to work directly with the animators. But my emphasis when working with the animators was less on the technical and more on the performance side.
When we were boarding and designing the main show, the studio tour was operating, so we were behind the glass. We were there in full view of the public. A lot less goofing off. Not zero goofing off, but a lot less. Every so often, somebody in the studio would like shoot a rubber band at the glass or, throw wadded up paper to see the guests jump. And that was always good for a laugh on both sides of the glass. You hear the spiel that the monitors, that kind of lead the guests along the pathway. They're timed like every minute and a half, 2 minutes. They come on and they give a little bit about what's going on behind the glass. The characters in that were Robin Williams and Walter Cronkite. And Walter Cronkite was live action, and Robin Williams was a little animated character, like one of the lost boys from Peter Pan. And man, I can still remember. I can still hear that thing.
Is this Neverland? I mean, these books are huge, and me without my cliff notes.
This is where animation begins, with a good story, adventure, romance, humor, suspense.
Boy, you get a paper cut here, Walter, you could lose a hand.
Of course, since we tell our stories with pictures as well as words, we bring them together here on the storyboard.
Looks like a comic strip, Walter.
Right, Robin, and this is the title of your story, Back to Neverland.
Well, Walter, I was thinking of maybe going with Peter Pan, First Blood. Coming in with twin Uzis going, Hook, we've got a problem. And have Jack Nicholson play Captain Hook going, maybe, maybe not, sucker, let's talk.
No, you're being cast as one of the little lost boys.
First, it was like, whoa, this is weird. Oh, gosh, this is uncomfortable. And, after like a couple hours on the first day, you're like, okay, if you sat in a restaurant, by the window and there's a sidewalk going by outside, it's about like that. You can tune it out pretty quick.
Even though we only had 90 days to complete it, it turned out well. We because Rescuers Down Under, which is being made in another building, a few blocks away, they were undergoing story problems. So we had a really top-notch animation team for Cranium Command. We had a lot of feature quality animators like Andreas Deja and Dave Kruxma and Nick Ranieri, all doing scenes on this little pre-show.
We had Pete Docter. He was just like a punk kid then, just starting out. And he was working for us. Chris Wall. I mean, we had some really great people.
I'm your commanding officer, General Knowledge, and it's my job to turn you mealy-mouthed meatheads into a crack squadron of Cranium Commandos. Your job, if you can cut it, will be to run the most sophisticated information system ever devised, the human brain.
General Knowledge was handled by Andreas Deja. Nick Ranieri did a lot of him. Chief Lee Bodo did a lot of him. Chris Wall also did a lot of him.
God, did we have Brian on that? We may have had Brian McEntee working on that with us. In fact, we did. We just went with a simpler style because we all like, the cartoony stuff. So we just went with a simple cartoony style. And the character of Buzzy was based on the animatronic that was already built. So that's just kind of a version of him. And then we just tried to keep in the same kind of graphic family. Well, and, we also wanted him in your face. And the idea of having a complicated background behind him just didn't matter. We had some photographic plates for backgrounds as well, kind of going the Terry Gilliam route with photos of heads. Those heads that you see, that's the crew.
The photographic heads that Gary is talking about stand in as the operating centers that the Cranium Commandos are placed into work.
We didn't have end credits on this, so this was our way of giving the crew credit, was to photograph them and then, have their heads be the ones with that are going to get screwed onto a body and have, crap dumped into them, into their brains. I may have combed my hair. I wasn't wearing the visor for that picture. I know that because, no, I had to take it off because because they were going to be like inside my head.
Ultimately, when it came out and it was screened down in Florida, the studio was really happy with it. Gary and I then segued onto the main show and ended up working for Jerry Reese.
We came up with the idea, all the other body parts that are affected by stress and affected by this kid's day, like what he sees. So Jerry was shooting live action of this kid's day. This is like all this point of view footage of him walking around school, and oh no, there's the bully, and wow, there's the girl he likes, and now he's riding a bike, and just all this live action stuff. And then we would kind of key off of that with, okay, so what's the heart doing? The heart's beating really fast. So we had we had Kevin Nealon and Dana Carvey doing their old Saturday Night Live bit as Hansel and Franz, because they're there to pump you up. And so they're the heart, and so we put them in these muscle suits and had this giant pump between them. And they, there's, oh, we are pumping faster now. Yeah, this is very hard.
Heart reporting, Captain. Left ventricle. Right ventricle. We are up and pumping.
The right brain and the left brain, the stomach would get upset. We had Bobcat Goldthwait as the adrenaline gland, and they had all these and these are all live action actors, in sets. So Bobcat was in this set with all these wires and sparks and lights all around him. It would fritz out.
Adrenal glands reporting, Captain. Ready to freak out at any second.
So, it was a lot of fun.
Okay, crew, report in. Left brain, right brain. Come in, please.
Yes, Captain. Did you call?
No. I guess I just pressed the wrong button.
It figures. No one ever wants to talk to me.
Who are you anyway?
I'm only the hypothalamus. I only monitor all the automatic functions of the body. All the things you don't need to worry about. I'm used to being taken for granted. Blink, blink, breathe, breathe. Day in, day out. Never a thank you, never a job well done.
Gee, I'm sorry. I had no idea.
Gary and I came up with the concept for the hypothalamus, the whole notion of him being this really morose and pessimistic character. We were inspired by a character from the book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was Marvin the Paranoid Android. He was this really morose robot, and we thought it was really funny. So he was our inspiration for the hypothalamus.
I remember there was a audio animatronic of the hypothalamus that had been built, and it was one of two. There was the main pilot, Buzzy, and then there was the hypothalamus that takes care of the automatic functions like just blinking and breathing and heartbeat and stuff like that. And they had built this thing. It was like $1 million animatronic, but they had nothing for it to do. Kirk would do this, oh boy, I'm just here doing my function. And they were like, oh my God, that's so funny. So they introduced that to me as a concept for the character, and I loved it. So we actually figured out even what that animatronic would do, how it would present itself, what its personality would be. I went ahead and cast Kirk as the final voice, which I did not have permission to do. In fact, Schneider had kind of made a rule that he did not want us putting ourselves, there had been a lot of that with, teams putting themselves in projects.
At the time, I was basically doing, who was I doing an impression of? The character for me and Gary. Yeah, it's kind of a slower, lazier version of my voice. I mean, I have kind of a deep voice, but I just accessed kind of a very lower register of my voice and just really slowed it down and made it, sound really tired. I remember Jerry just leaving the mic open, setting up the scene, saying, okay, everybody's filing out. Just riff on things you might say to people as they're filing out. And it was in the recording session that I think I improvised, Madam, you've forgotten your child. And then someone in the room said, oh, and I can't remember who, it might have been Jerry. Oh, that's your husband? I'm so sorry. So it was just us kind of ping-ponging ideas back and forth in the recording session. That's where those little lines at the end came from.
Please gather your belongings and exit the command center through the doors on your left. Madam, you forgot your child. Oh, that's your husband? I'm very sorry. I mean that.
I just thought he was the perfect voice. So I just didn't let them know, and I just kind of acted like I was still recording temp stuff. And I just recorded him in the final studio and mixed it. And so when we had opened it to the public, I was sitting next to Peter. And so I said, "Good voice, huh?" And then Peter thought about it for a minute and he's like, "Oh, you bastard." And it's like, I said, "Perfect voice though, right?" And he was like, yeah, it is.
As complicated as the pre-show might seem, that was just animation. The main event had so many working parts that Jerry and the team still had to navigate in 90 days.
I focused on prepping for the really extensive shoot for all the live action continuous point of view. I had given myself that challenge of like, keep the eyes open all the time. It's more complicated than it might seem to pull off the trick of continuous eye point of view and then characters from other screens seeing it and reacting to it. So if you think about that, you have all these different characters that need to see what's happening through those eyes and respond and talk to the auto animatronic character who's supposed to be piloting all of this and also seeing through the eyes and seeing the discussion about what to do about what you see through the eyes from the other characters on other screens. It's just a lot to juggle. And so I had to start with the point of view through the eyes being the anchor. I had to do a story reel to try to envision how all of it would fit. And then frankly, carry a boombox around with us with the temp track and play that back while I was filming the point of view to try to have the things that we would discover through that point of view time generally with how they were going to work as all the inside the head chatter was going on about the situations. That was a way for me to anticipate what the timing should likely be or close to it, and then just write it in stone with what I shot through the point of view, and then go, okay, that's now, I can't change that. That is my anchor. Then I had to play that back for myself as a director to see while I was cueing Grodin and Lovitz and all the other people to say their lines. So I had to have one eye on my point of view monitor and go, oh, they've just turned the corner. They have to say the line before that. I have to cut, go back. Okay, now I need you to say the line. I would cue here. And it's like, okay, you finish the line just before we turn the corner. Okay, it worked. So I was always like the schizophrenia of having one eye on the actor and one eye on the point of view that was driving the timing. It's something people take for granted is, there's occasionally you see a reflection of the character whose head you're supposed to be writing in, like in a mirror or in glass. Like I think there's a trophy case at the end where you see his reflection, a mirror in his bedroom at the beginning. So that you see, oh, there's the reflection of the character. And then you'll see, oh, and when you go down to the breakfast table, there's a kid's hand that pulls a fork with something on it, as if to eat. I knew from the start, like that was going to make or break my shoot days with the point of view, is I needed a kid who could, since it was continuous point of view, I couldn't get a bunch of little pieces. I had to have long takes with careful rehearsal from camera operators and lighting people and choreography of people in different rooms where we would go from one room to the other continuously and keep shooting. I had to have a kid who understood everything enough and was coordinated enough to stay out of sight when needed, but right near the camera and tuck right under it and not bump the camera operator and provide the hands of the point of view right at the right moment. Thought, if I get a kid who can't do that, it's going to explode my schedule and budget. So thankfully, Scott Curtis, who wound up doing the voice of the character, as well as doing all of that choreography, I don't think there was even one take, and thinking back, I don't think I had to do one additional take because of a screw up from him. As you're looking through his eyes, supposedly, I thought, okay, the camera operator has to learn to try to be a point of view of a person with a personality and not just be a traditional camera operator. So I actually went out with Natalie Gregory, who was the girl that he meets in the story in science class. And so we went to the school location and we did a rehearsal, and we used my home video camera at the time. And so I, since I came from the world of animation into live action and stuff, I was used to thinking in that way. I did, for example, when they were saying, well, how do you mean camera operate with personality? So I said, well, let's do the part where he meets her for the first time And then he's sort of shy to look at her again. So, we sat next to her, and just in coming to the seat, you hear her voice, and I just took my video camera and did a direct look at her, and then like a zip away from her to look at the table and look at my own hands, or Scott's hands. And then like carefully daring to look closer and closer to her and seeing like, okay, she's working on her science project. There's her hands, there's her arms that go up to her shoulder, and then dare to look at her face. And she's aware that she's being looked at and sort of allows it for a moment and is kind of amused, and then glances right into the lens, and then quick, I panned away. It's like, oh no, she looked at me. So it's like when you did that kind of behavior from the camera, then you believed, okay, I'm seeing through the eyes of a person, and this is how they're feeling and how they're reacting.
You're probably very confused at listening to all that. But the bad news is, it's about to get more complicated, but necessary. And now we've arrived at the main animatronic for the show, Buzzy, the Cranium Commando pilot perched in a cockpit seat hovering above the audience. But Jerry Reese wanted it to do more than that.
He had built a sophisticated audio animatronic with a lot of ability to express gestures and expressions. But in the big picture of things, it was riding on a pretty long pendulum that extended from where the two eye screens were out towards the audience. So it got quite close to the front row of people in the audience, and it would swing back and forth. And I decided it could swing for two reasons. The one reason I thought was movement of the pendulum for reasons of making an attractive sort of composition in the room. But the second way to use the pendulum, which I really introduced more aggressively when I said, stop closing the eyes, keep them open, and move through this world continuously. Then I said, okay, the pendulum he's riding on will be centrifugal force. You're running down the hall, and when you make a right turn, the pendulum swings to the left, and it feels like you have gravity and momentum and physics at work. I thought, okay, before they know where to animate the character looking, they have to figure out where I decided to swing that pendulum. But I went, okay, I've got this fairly big screen at home. I'll play back my point of view footage on that. And then I set up my home video camera looking at that. And then I took a little miniature of Buzzy and put it on the end of a pencil and held it up in view of my home video camera. And I would play back my point of view, and I would just hold the character with my hand on the pencil tip, and I would swing it to the left or right or center. And sometimes I would move it because, he's purposely piloting over there to look closer at Natalie. It's like, now he's not piloting the pendulum. It's just swinging in response to physics. And so I would do that. And so I made all those decisions, recorded it on video, having the pendulum respond to my continuous point of view, and then took that to Doug Griffith and Dave Fighton, who were the two audio animatronic animators. They were going to do shifts. So we were trying to work, I'm trying to remember whether it was 24 hours a day, but I think it might have been. They tag teamed. So we had lots and lots of hours going to the audio animatronics. But first thing is I had them take the real pendulum and have it match my home video.
Now imagine yourself explaining all these moving parts to Disney executives, expecting you to complete this in only 90 days.
Then I began to edit it together and show it to people in Glendale, in the Imagineering offices and stuff. But of course, they didn't have the audio animatronic figures there. They weren't in the theater. They were just looking at screens that were set up in Glendale. There was inevitably confusion about how it would all fit together eventually, because even though they were then looking at the point of view through the eyes and the screens that represented all the other body parts that were participating. So I finally got everybody there, but they would hear a voice and go, Katzenberg would go, hey, Jer, who's that? Who's talking? And I go, well, he's not here. It's an audio animatronic figure. It's in the theater. It's called Buzzy. And you will see him when I finish installing this, you'll watch him say that line. He'll be right here in front of the screen. Oh, okay. Geez. It's so weird. And Marty Sklar, it would happen again. Then, we'd come back and have another screening. And then Marty would go, oh, who's that? That's not Buzzy. It's like, oh, that's another animatronic. It's called the hypothalamus. He's also in the theater. He's going to be over here. And he said, I'm really glad that you know how this is all going to work, because I can't make heads or tail of it, but I trust you. So they did trust me to do it. And I remember there's a section with a food fight. And so that gets pretty nuts. First of all, choreographed the whole fight, which was in a real cafeteria with a bunch of real kids. And by the way, the bully, just before the food fight, picks the character up and stuffs him in a trash can, and that's why the food fight happens. I actually handed the camera to the bully, so the bully actually becomes the camera operator. He really takes the camera away from our camera operator and carries it and stuffs it in a trash can. So we really had a lot of participation from our people in the cast. And now the food fights, that was going to happen. Just before I shot it, I had planned it all out. And part of what I was planning was the complexity of the poor George Wendt character, Appetite, has been waiting and waiting for food because the kid skipped breakfast that morning, right? So all the way through his days, can you please throw a morsel of food in here? So finally, the food fight that's going to be a feast. And so while food is getting thrown, it's like, hey, can you toss a burger down here? And it's like, he tosses a burger in. So I needed the hand of the live action character, whose eyes you're seeing through, to stuff a burger just under the camera as if it's being eaten, and then drop a giant burger into the set with George Wendt, and it splashes down in the stomach acid. He's like, hallelujah, manna from heaven. So you see the cause and effect. You really feel like you're writing in it. So I had planned that out, and I got a call, and two people who were really keeping a watch on budget and schedule and everything called me away from my set for a quick meeting on the studio lot. And I'm like, yeah, what's going on? And they said, it's too ambitious. What you're doing is it's too ambitious. You can't do the food fight and everything. And I said, well, is it okay if I install part of a show? And they went, well, no. And I said, are you going to give me more resources so I can finish the show? And they said, well, no. And I said, well, I guess I'm just going to have to go back and try to finish it. Because you don't want part of a show and you're not going to give me more resources, but I guess I just have to go do this. They're like, well, if you need anything, you call us. So, and then I went back and we just, we did it. We were ambitious, but we were sort of energized because we all knew we were doing something crazy that none of us had ever done before. But we loved it. And so all our nervous energy was going into have a super productive day. And it was nice to be able to sort of do a little wave to that group and remember when you were panicked, but we got through it. Finally, when we got it all together in the theater and had both audio animatronic figures, all the screens activated, all the sound mixed around you, then it was like, oh, of course, there it all is. It all makes sense. It's all working. So it was just nice after they had sort of micromanaged Colossal Pictures into a disaster. They really allowed me to run with the project, even when they were completely confused by how many pieces there were and how it would ultimately fit together.
They did what's called a soft opening of the attraction. They didn't publicize that it was open, but they started letting people in to see it, basically just to troubleshoot it and see how it was playing. And I remember being in a room full of people who all filed into this waiting area at the attraction in the Wonders of Life Pavilion. And I remember when our short started to unspool and it got big laughs. I remember one of the biggest laughs, that drowned out the next couple lines of dialogue was where the general says, we've had some successes, and they show Albert Einstein, and some failures, and they show Ernest. That picture of Ernest just brought the house down.
I mean, we were thrilled particularly because when we saw it, I think we were seeing it with an audience. It was like kind of the premiere, but it wasn't, like a red carpet thing where only the cast and crew. It was part guests going into it. And this is kind of the first time we'd seen something that we worked on that closely with the public reacting to it. And, they were laughing and, they were getting all the jokes. And so we were like, yay, we didn't screw it up.
My mom got in touch with me and said, oh, I got Carl Sagan's book, The Demon Haunted World. And I read it and your show is in it. And I said, what? I said, I'm sure you're mistaken, Mom. She's like, no. I underlined it. And next time I went to visit, she showed me. And sure enough, Carl Sagan had a section in The Demon Haunted World where he talked about the sorry state of education and curiosity and messages about science and all of that. And he was sort of lamenting that, but then saying here and there's sparks of hope. There are things to be hopeful about. And he mentions, I believe it's 10 things that gave him hope. And we are one of them. I'll read it word for word here. He says, seated in the theater, you find yourself inside the head of an 11-year-old boy. You look out through his eyes. You encounter his typical daily crises: bullies, authoritarian adults, crushes on girls. You hear the voice inside his head. You witness his neurological and hormonal responses to his social environment. And you get to wonder how you work on the inside. I was just so honored that our team, when we had gone in to fix this thing where they're like, oh, we effing hate it, what would you do instead? And in our pell-mell dash to do the better thing, it wound up with Carl Sagan feeling it was worthy of permanently giving a wonderful review as something that gave him hope.
That wouldn't be the show's only lasting legacy. One of the crew members was Pete Docter, who went on to write and direct Pixar's Inside Out, a spiritual successor to Cranium Command. And Cranium Command would also cause one more domino to fall in Disney's history.
Gary and I's sensibility, is kind of all over both the pre-show and the main show. He got pulled into Charlie Fink, Charlie Fink was running the development department at the time. We got pulled into his office and told there's an opening for directors on Beauty and the Beast. It might be you guys.
Next time on The Look Back Machine.